Unit 3, page 41. Speaking. Exercise 3.
Now you have about a minute to decide which two ideas would be most likely to stop young people from smoking.
Unit 3, page 41. Speaking. Exercise 4.
Well, they're all quite good ideas, aren't they?
Yes, but we've already decided that raising the age when people can buy cigarettes won't work, haven't we?
Yes, they just get other people to buy them. We need to think of a way of stopping young people actually wanting to smoke in the first place.
That's true, but the thing is that all the ideas have been tried before, haven't they?
Yes, but something needs to be done, doesn't it?
You're right, they've got to do something.
So, can we decide on two ideas?
Shall we suggest a health campaign in primary schools and a complete ban on cigarette advertising?
Okay, that sounds sensible.
Thank you.
Unit 3, page 41. Speaking. Exercise 8.
Now, I'd like you to talk about something together for about 2 minutes. I'd like you to imagine that you are on a committee which has been asked to come up with ideas for stopping young people from smoking. Here are some of the suggestions and a question for you to discuss. First, you have some time to look at the task. Now, talk to each other about the advantages and disadvantages of each suggestion.
I think these are really good ideas. So let's take them one at a time, shall we?
OK. Well, for a start, I think they should raise the price of cigarettes. That way, young people would probably smoke less.
We don't want them to smoke less. We want them not to smoke at all. If it was up to me, I'd raise the smoking age to 20.
20? I'm not sure about that. You might stop young people from buying cigarettes, but if you did that, they would just get their older friends or even their parents to buy cigarettes for them. They do that now, don't they?
That's true. What about banning advertising? Do you think that would make a difference?
Yes, it might. Seeing pictures of good-looking people smoking and looking happy must make smoking very attractive to some young people.
Yeah. So if we stop them from seeing those images, it might help.
The other thing I think they should do is have an advertising campaign to show people how smoking can damage their health.
They've tried that before, haven't they? And they found it didn't make much difference. It's like the health warnings on cigarette packets, which say things like smoking kills. They don't seem to stop people smoking.
You're right. I think they tried it with teenagers, and teenagers do all kinds of things that damage their health, and they don't seem to care. What they should do is have a campaign in every primary school.
You're probably right. It's definitely worth a try, and we've got to try everything. Do you think providing people with alternatives would be a good idea, such as patches that you stick on your arm or special chewing gum?
Anything's worth a try. Have you heard about electronic cigarettes?
Yes. That's a really weird idea, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but I know someone who tried them, and it's worked quite well so far.
Thank you. Now you have about a minute to decide which two ideas would be most likely to stop young people from smoking.
Well, they're all quite good ideas, aren't they?
Yes, but we've already decided that raising the age when people can buy cigarettes won't work, haven't we?
Yes, they just get other people to buy them. We need to think of a way of stopping young people actually wanting to smoke in the first place.
That's true, but the thing is that all the ideas have been tried before, haven't they?
Yes, but something needs to be done, doesn't it?
You're right, they've got to do something.
Unit 4, page 50. Listening. Exercise 2.
Adventurous. Conservative. Conventional. Unconventional. Extraordinary. Fashionable. Imaginative. Normal. Strange. Surprising. Traditional. Unusual.
Unit 4, page 50. Listening. Exercise 5. You will hear 5 short extracts in which people are talking about bringing up children. For questions 1 to 5, choose from the list, A to H, what each speaker says. Use the letters only once. There are 3 extra letters which you do not need to use. You now have 30 seconds to look at part 3. Speaker 1.
I'd say that men and women are as good as each other at looking after children and loving them. I grew up without my dad around. At the time it seemed normal enough, but now I have kids of my own, I realise that mothers and fathers help us in different ways. As a dad myself, I know there's a bond between children and their dads that's just as important as having a mum around, and from experience, I'd say that only a man can really do that job.
Speaker 2.
If you're thinking about the day-to-day care of children, I'd say that fathers and mothers can be equally successful. I know several families where the mother is the main breadwinner and the father looks after the kids, and it works perfectly well. But I'm sure that the physical relation between a baby and its mother creates an emotional tie which there's no substitute for. And of course, this won't change because men will never be able to have children.
Speaker 3.
Mothers and fathers are different and always will be, but both are essential. It's far too much work for one person to look after a family on their own, so it's important for the father to help out right from the start. The key thing is to always put the interests of the children first. I know that I have a special relationship with them as a mum, but I can see that my kids need their dads around too.
Speaker 4.
The idea that men are worse at looking after children is rubbish. Dads can do everything just as well as mums. Women are only better at childcare because at the moment they spend more time with their kids than men do. It's like my mum. She doesn't understand how to use email, but if she worked in an office like me, she'd know exactly what to do. It's just a question of familiarity.
Speaker 5.
When I was a kid, my father made more effort to spend time with us than most fathers would have done, which wasn't what real men were supposed to do. Whenever he wasn't at work, he dedicated all his time to me and my sisters. Other than my mum, people didn't really recognise how special he was. My father wasn't like everyone else, so people just ignored him. Nowadays, most men are involved with their kids like he was.
Unit 4, page 53. Speaking. Exercise 2.
In this part of the test, I'm going to give each of you 2 photographs. I'd like you to talk about your photographs on your own for about a minute, and also to answer a question about your partner's photographs. Claudia, it's your turn first. Here are your photographs. They show 2 offices. I'd like you to compare the photographs and say how you think the relationships are different in the 2 offices. All right?
In this picture, all the employees are sitting at their own computers, so they almost certainly can't see each other. This probably means that they don't talk to each other very often, except in their breaks. It looks like a very big office, maybe with hundreds of employees, so it could be a call center of some kind. In this picture, the manager may work in a separate office, so the chances are he or she is quite remote from the staff. He or she may not even know all the employees' names, but probably has to check regularly how hard they are working. By contrast, the other picture shows a small open office with just a few employees. I should think that these employees have good relationships with each other, and you can see that they all look quite happy. Their manager may be in this office, but you can't tell who it is. I'd say he or she knows the names of all the staff, and probably doesn't need to check how hard they're working. In offices like these, I imagine it's possible to have regular meetings so that problems and difficulties can be sorted out before they get worse.
Thank you. Costas, which of these places would you prefer to work in? Why?
I'd much rather work in the office on the right, because everyone looks so happy and relaxed. I guess the atmosphere in the other office might be very tense. I think I'd find this office quite a stressful place to work in. I think it's probably a call center, and these places have a bad reputation as places to work. I know from experience that I work better if I'm relaxed. I'm also quite a sociable person, so I'd enjoy the social side of any job I did. I think it would be easier to make friends with colleagues in this office.
Unit 5, page 63. Listening. Exercise 3. You will hear a man talking about his experiences of eating in other countries. For questions 1 to 7, choose the best answer, A, B or C. You now have 1 minute to look at part 4.
This afternoon we have in the studio John Reginald, a former diplomat and now a full-time writer. His first book, an autobiography, has the title A Strong Stomach. Why this title, John?
Well, food really can be a tricky issue. Obviously, as a diplomat, you attend many official dinners, and you have to learn to negotiate your way through a minefield of rules of etiquette. What is acceptable in one culture can be quite inappropriate in another. But the main thing I discovered very early on is that basically you really have to be prepared to eat whatever is set in front of you. And believe me, this does sometimes necessitate having a strong stomach, hence the title.
Can you give us some examples?
The one that springs to mind happened at my first official dinner when I was in the Middle East. The main dish was a sheep's head, and as the guest of honour, I was presented with the eyeball, which over there is regarded as a delicacy.
Oh dear! Did you manage to eat it?
I really didn't have much choice. If I hadn't eaten it, I would have offended my hosts, as simple as that.
So, was that the worst thing you've ever been served?
It was among the worst, certainly. But there have been many others. I had dried bat once when I was in the Pacific. That wasn't very nice either. Dry and leathery. It wasn't so much the taste, which was bad enough, but the fact that it was almost impossible to swallow. But I think top of the list is probably snake blood, which was served to me at a meal in Thailand.
What makes something repulsive to eat?
If I can see what it actually is, it's worse. If I'm obviously eating a part of an animal which is recognisable as such, then that makes it harder to eat. If what is on your plate is an eyeball, then you can't pretend that you're eating something else. For some people, smell is the most important factor. But I don't have a very good sense of smell, fortunately. And yes, taste is important as well. I once ate raw turtle eggs. They were fishy in an extremely unpleasant way.
So, what advice would you give to someone in a situation where something is put in front of them that they don't want to eat?
I'd say, 1, don't not eat it. You need to be polite. It could be one of their national dishes. 2, take it easy. Eat too fast, and you might find that you get some more. And 3, pretend you're eating something you like.
I have to say that I found your book very amusing. From the title, I thought it was going to be some sort of medical textbook, so I was pleasantly surprised. Is there another book in the pipeline?
Yes, but the next one will be totally different. My editor wanted me to do a follow-up, again based on my experiences, things that almost led to diplomatic incidents. And I had thought about doing a sort of guidebook for businessmen who travel abroad, etiquette in different countries. But I've recently become interested in the origins and rationale behind the consumption of food in different countries. So that's what it'll be about. Unit 5, page 65. Speaking. Exercise 2.
Now I'd like you to talk about something together for about 2 minutes. I'd like you to imagine that your teacher has asked you for your ideas on different ways of getting to know a country and its culture. Here are some of the ways of getting to know a country and its culture, and a question for you to discuss. First, you have some time to look at the task. Now talk to each other about how much you can learn about a country and its culture from these experiences.
Shall I start?
Yes, if you like.
Personally, I think you can probably learn quite a lot about a country if you're doing voluntary work there. You're likely to be working alongside local people for a start.
I guess so, but I'm not sure how much you'd learn about the country. You'd probably be working with poor people or disadvantaged people. They're not representative of the whole country.
Yes, that's a good point. Okay, let's move on to sightseeing.
If you ask me, I believe you can get a good general impression of the history of a country from sightseeing because you are seeing lots of historical monuments. Do you agree?
Yeah, and you usually have a guide who tells you all about the history too, but you don't really get to meet the people, do you?
No, you're right, because you're usually in a big group of people from your own country. Learning a language? In my opinion, you can learn a lot about a country from learning a language. For a start, if you know a language, you can communicate with the people. I don't think you can really know a country if you don't speak the language. What do you think?
I agree.
Au pair? I'm not sure I know what an au pair is.
It's someone who goes to live in a country so they can study the language. They stay with the family and look after the children, and in exchange they get their food and accommodation and time off to go to classes.
Ah, right. Well, I'd say you could learn a lot through doing that. You'd be living with a typical family, seeing how they live, and improving your language.
Not necessarily. They could be recent immigrants and speak their own language all the time.
Oh, I suppose so. Right, the last one. Backpacking. Have you ever done that abroad?
Yes, I backpacked around Asia for 6 months a few years ago.
And did you learn a lot about the countries you visited?
Yeah, quite a lot. You tend to use public transport, so you get to meet ordinary people, and you can take your time to look around places. But if you don't speak the language, as I didn't, then the experience is limited.
Thank you.
Unit 5, page 65. Speaking. Exercise 6.
Now you have about a minute to decide which 2 experiences you think you would learn the most from.
I think we more or less agreed that you might not learn a lot from voluntary work.
Yes.
And sightseeing. I think we both thought that you'd learn a lot about the culture and history of a place, but you wouldn't have many opportunities to meet the people.
Yes, so we've got 3 left to choose from. Personally, I choose learning a language and backpacking.
I'd agree with you on learning a language, but I'd have to disagree with you on backpacking.
Would you? Why?
Because, as you said, if you don't speak the language, then you can't really communicate with the people.
Why would you choose working as an au pair?
Well, I know you said that you might end up working with recent immigrants, but I'm sure you'd be able to change families if that happened.
That's very true. I take your point.
Shall we agree on learning a language and working as an au pair then?
Okay, you've convinced me.
Thank you.
Unit 5, page 65. Speaking. Exercise 8.
I don't know about that. Absolutely. I agree with you up to a point. Sorry, but I have to disagree with you there. I'm not sure I agree with you there. I couldn't agree more.
Unit 6, page 70. Listening. Exercise 2. You will hear part of a radio program about factors which determine success. For questions 1 to 10, complete the sentences with a word or short phrase. You now have 45 seconds to look at part 2.
The idea that thinking is superior to feeling is an attitude that many psychologists today would consider out of date. They would argue that emotional intelligence is just as important as IQ when determining a person's overall success. Let me give you 2 examples of research which backs up this theory. When 95 graduates from Harvard University were followed into middle age, the men with the highest intelligence test scores in college were not found to be particularly successful in terms of salary, productivity or status compared with those who had scored lower. IQ, it would seem, contributes only about 20% to the factors that determine life success, leaving 80% to other forces. So what are these other forces? Peter Salovey of Yale University would argue that emotional self-control is one of the most important. He conducted an experiment with a class of 4-year-olds. He gave each of them a sweet and told them they could eat it immediately. However, if they could resist eating the sweet until the experimenter came back into the classroom, he would then give them 2 sweets. For what seemed like an endless 15 minutes, most of the children waited. However, about a third of the children were unable to wait. They grabbed the sweet almost immediately after the experimenter left the room. When the same children were followed up as teenagers, those who at 4 had been able to resist temptation were as adolescents more socially competent, self-reliant, dependable and confident. They also had dramatically higher scores on IQ tests. However, Those who at 4 had been unable to resist temptation were more indecisive, more socially isolated, and less confident. This experiment suggests that emotional self-control is an important contributor to intellectual potential, quite apart from IQ itself. Another ability that can determine not just academic but job success is optimism. In a study of insurance salesmen, psychologist Martin Seligman showed the relation between optimism and high work performance. Selling insurance is a difficult job, and 3/4 of insurance salesmen leave in their first 3 years. Given the high costs of recruiting and training, the emotional state of new employees has become an economic issue for insurance companies. Seligman's study found that new salesmen who were natural optimists sold much more than salesmen who were pessimists, and were much less likely to leave in the first year. Why? Because pessimists think failures are due to some permanent characteristic in themselves that they cannot change, whereas optimists believe they are due to something temporary that can be changed. They believe they can succeed next time round.
Unit 6, page 73. Speaking. Exercise 1.
Now, I'd like you to talk about something together for about 2 minutes. I'd like you to imagine that the principal of your college has asked you to give a talk to the other students on the best ways to relieve stress. Here are some activities people do to relieve stress and a question for you to discuss. First, you have some time to look at the task. Now, talk to each other about how effective each of the activities is in relieving stress.
Unit 6, page 73. Speaking. Exercise 3.
Do you agree that living in a city is more stressful than living in the country?
I never actually lived in the country, but I imagine it would be.
Why?
Well, for several reasons. First of all, because many cities nowadays are huge, people spend a lot of time just getting to and from their workplace. This is stressful as they usually have to travel on crowded trains or buses, or if they go by car, they may spend hours stuck in traffic jams. They can never be sure that they will get to work on time, so this makes the daily commute to work stressful.
Do you agree, Pierre?
Yes, I do. And apart from the reasons that Maria gave, I'd also like to add that since people live much closer together in cities, there is a greater possibility of tension between them. Just to give a few examples, people work and sleep at different times, so there is bound to be conflict here. Some people don't think of their neighbors and play loud music or have their televisions up too high, and because the walls of most modern buildings are quite thin, you can hear everything.
Maria, do you think people today are more or less stressed than they were in the past?
That's difficult to say. I think people today think that they are more stressed than people were in the past, yes. But whether they are or not is another matter.
There was an interesting program on TV where a family lived life for a couple of months as they would have lived it in the 1940s. I can remember being surprised that at the end of the series, the woman said she found modern life more stressful than life in the 1940s. She said it was because a woman had a simpler role in life then, to be wives, mothers, and housewives. Nowadays, they have to be all those things, not to mention work as well.
I agree, but I think one of the main reasons why people feel more stressed today is because society is more materialistic. people want more things. Things cost money. In order to make more money, you have to work more. That means you have less time to do the other things you either want to do or have to do. And that is what makes you stressed.
Also, I think technology has made life today more stressful. In the past, people worked a 9-to-5 job and then went home and switched off. But nowadays, if you work in business, for example, you are on call almost 24 hours a day. And even when you are on holiday, you are expected to check your emails.
Is it always a good thing to be relaxed? Can you think of any occasions when it might be a bad thing to be too relaxed? Pierre?
Too relaxed?
Maria?
Well, you can't be too relaxed in certain jobs, at least not all of the time. For example, pilots need to be alert during takeoff and landing. They can be relaxed the rest of the flight unless something happens and there is an emergency, of course. In fact, there are many jobs where you can be relaxed a lot of the time but need to be alert and concentrating hard at other times. Surgeons, for instance, and air traffic controllers. Not only are people's lives in their hands, but also, in the case of pilots, their own lives too.
It's not a good idea to be too relaxed during an interview either, because you might give the impression that you don't really care if you get the job or not.
And we mustn't forget about when people are driving. I heard that most accidents happen when people are driving near their homes because they are familiar with the route. They are too relaxed and not paying enough attention to the road, and that's when accidents.
Unit 6, page 73. Speaking. Exercise 4.
Well, for several reasons. First of all, because many cities nowadays are huge, people spend a lot of time just getting to and from their workplace. This is stressful as they usually have to travel on crowded trains.
I'd also like to add that since people live much closer together in cities, there is a greater possibility of tension between them. Nowadays, they have to be all those things, not to mention work as well.
I agree, but I think one of the main reasons why people feel more stressed today is because society is more materialistic.
Also, I think technology has made life today more stressful.
For example, pilots need to be alert during takeoff and landing. In fact, there are many jobs where you can be relaxed a lot of the time, but need to be alert and concentrating hard at other times. Surgeons, for instance, and air traffic controllers. Not only are people's lives in their hands, but also, in the case of pilots, their own lives too. And we mustn't forget about when people are driving.
Unit 6, page 73. Speaking. Exercise 6.
But also. For example. Forget about. Not only. One of.
Unit 6, page 73. Speaking. Exercise 8.
First of all, because many cities nowadays are huge, people spend a lot of time just getting to and from their workplace. People work and sleep at different times, so there is bound to be conflict here.
Unit 6, page 73. Speaking. Exercise 9.
Which do you think would be more stressful, being self-employed or working in a large company? What could companies do to make work and the workplace more relaxing for their employees? What kind of holiday would you find stressful?